Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. All right, welcome back to episode 35 of the Near Memo with David, Mike, and me, Greg Sterling, and we're excited to be talking to you about everything that happened in the week of search, social, and commerce with a local twist, angle, lens, inflection. As always, tons and tons going on. It's always hard to sort of select these topics because there's so many interesting things to talk about. But first, Mike is going to talk about some of the Google shopping related announcements that came out yesterday, I believe.
Right. So
specifically Lens,
right? So Lens came out a number of years ago, and it has evolved using Google's Vision AI to be very good at identifying whatever's in the visual frame of reference. It literally will give you a singular answer when you drop an image in there. And it's gotten very good at that, but it's never been tied into a more complete search query where you can ask questions or shop around it. With the announcement of MUM at the Google I/O, they've developed a AI that integrates language and images into a singular sort of experience, and they're talking about doing that with Lens. And so you can, for example, in iOS, you'll see a new button in the Google app that you can make all the images on the page is searchable through Google Lens, and then they can deliver them back in a shopping experience or whatever. And you can add, my understanding is you can add context to the image and enhance your search as well. So, the search results have been coming more visual, and Google's Vision AI has gotten better over the last few years. But now they're sort of merging sort of the written and the spoken word with the image for a new experience. And I think, to me, it's not significant in the specific of it, but in the arc of it. So I would open it to you for your comments.
I think that's a good take in the parlance of our time. I think that as with many features that Google rolls out, right, you never know which one is really going to hit. But I think that that directionally, I totally agree with you that it signals Google's overarching commitment to images as a key piece of the search or visuals even as a key piece of the search experience. And I think it's something that from our standpoint or at least Mike and yours and my background as sort of traditional SEOs, I think that our industry as a whole radically underemphasizes images and videos in the search experience and the conversion experience.
In the ranking experience.
In the ranking experience, and that this should be another wake-up call to really think about how strong a role or how large a role images play.
Well, and just from a consumer standpoint, I mean, people repeatedly value images and value video in making decisions. So there's that side of it as well. It's like just in catering to the customer and their needs, delivering a better experience.
There's I guess experimental, but it's been around for quite a while, that if you do a search on a product in a local market, Google under the pack will surface a search by images interface, and it's a totally visual. It's a Pinteresty like interface where you click in and you see panels. All you see is the star rating. You don't see anything more. A picture and the star rating and the business name. Totally visual interface to local, to products, to items. And it's not been written about hardly at all. And yet to me, it's really part and parcel of this bigger trend. And going to impact local as much as more maybe than it impacts anything else. And it's an area too, like David pointed out, the businesses, you look at pictures and it's like, oh my God, they're terrible. They're absolutely disgusting. They let customers upload the total crap. They never report them. They don't, it's clip.
Well, you've got a sort of I don't know what to call it. It's a kind of an image SEO, suppress the negative customer images by flooding the zone with all your professionally produced, good looking pictures. I mean, that's going to be something that people need to pay more attention to.
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned in playing with the images over the last couple of months is Google ranks the top 10 images that they want to show. You can, I mean, they're ranking everything, and they are ranking images. And so it's critical that, that you do that. But so I just see it as the biggest trend in local that, as David points out, has gone largely unappreciated. Although there were at least 2 talks at White Sparks conference this week about images and the importance of doing them in local. So I think that's beginning to change.
And even in my presentation, which wasn't explicitly about images, one of the questions was, how do you optimize images for Google? So it's maybe something that business owners are, sort of have a sixth sense for, or at least the savvier ones do. But I think, as marketers, we tend to focus on, reviews and title tags and site architecture and internal links. And, meanwhile, the first thing that customers look at on their homepage, in air quotes, on Google is the image. So just start to pay more attention to that would be a good takeaway.
The interesting thing about the last local search ranking factors is that Darren, you had the traditional ranking factors, which of course is derivative of the work that you originally did, David. But then he did conversion factors, right? So that was an interesting thing. What was getting people sort of across the threshold? And I don't think images, reviews are all in the top 3, I think. But I suspect that images will make their way up that list eventually, because I do think that they're an important conversion factor. Couple of last kind of comments. So Snapchat, Snap, Pinterest, as you mentioned, Mike, Amazon, also doing visual search to varying degrees. I mean, Amazon introduced a visual search tool years ago, and they seem to have done not much with it. It's sort of there. You can search barcodes, you can look pointed at objects, and it's pretty good. It doesn't seem to have materially changed from what I can tell. I don't use it that much, but I use it sometimes. Pinterest, I think, is pretty good, very much like what you describe in the Google Lens shopping experience. And I'm not really a Snapchat user, although my kids are. But they're definitely doing a visual search kind of play as well. So consistent with what you're saying. And there's no
segue.
Good,
no good segue here.
Let me come up with one. When I'm looking for a restaurant,
after looking at the pictures,
item number 2 in this week's Near Memo is Yelp rolling out their new guest management app. I guess it's a web app for restaurants, software product for restaurants to deal with not just the wait list, which they acquired a company several years ago that dealt with wait lists, but also sort of table management and guest interactions and these kinds of things. So they rolled this out. It's essentially a purely SaaS product, and I think my overwhelming reaction to it was fairly positive from a strategic standpoint, and certainly what you can see in their product landing page seems to be fairly well executed. I don't think Yelp has ever lacked for quality engineers and product sort of designers. So I think that it looks compelling from a restaurant user standpoint. I think the bigger question, which Mike brought up on Twitter, is can Yelp what appears to be a superior product overcome Yelp's sort of branding problems with their restaurant customers? And I think that remains to be seen. I think that potentially Yelp's better customer base, and maybe the one that they're really targeting this towards, even though their language appears to be very single mom and pop restaurant focused, maybe the adoption will really come from multi-location and enterprise restaurants who want to convert to a sort of more modern platform. But strategically, I think, Mike, you and I had talked several years ago in our Street Fight column about Yelp's need to move away from this CPM, CPC kind of crappy banner, advertising largely product into something that's more traditional SaaS that actually helps their customers. I think this is a strong effort in that regard. And I would just say it is interesting that as much as Yelp likes to tout how much they're diversifying ad revenue anyway, outside of the restaurant vertical, that this is a very deeply focused restaurant vertical SaaS offering, as opposed to something that's targeting multiple service type businesses or anything like that. So an interesting release. Seems like a pretty nice release on the surface. And the question is how well will it get adopted?
It's interesting too, though. Will it increase or decrease the conflict around reviews with the people who use this product? And it depends on how they approach it, right? Who is their customer and how are they servicing them? And in the past, they've always viewed their customer as the end user, and they told the businesses to take a hike. And obviously, that's an attitude that doesn't work very well in SaaS.
So
that's right. And Greg, you brought up the point though that potentially there is a way for this to help customers solicit genuine reviews from actual Yelp users. I guess you don't have to be a Yelp user to be a guest in this product, but theoretically they'd be able to help you do things like collect reviews from guests, which they've done for Yelp app users who have redeemed an offer for a long time to follow up with them about their experience. So it seems like a natural extension of that mindset that, hey, a feedback request from a legitimate Yelp customer could lead to a legitimate Yelp review.
Yeah, I pitched this idea years ago now to Luther Lowe at Yelp, and I said, you really could transform your whole relationship with small businesses if you solicited reviews on their behalf with some of your once they started sort of doing reservation tools and RFP tools and things that could verify that the person was actually a customer of the business. And he sort of disputed that, he thought that could be gamed equally. But I think this is a key thing that they need to do. They really need to start helping businesses get reviews from legitimate customers, and that's the path toward healing for them. It's interesting. I looked quickly while you were talking at the market cap of Toast and Yelp. Because Toast, which is a point of sale system and marketing platform for restaurants, just went public. And their market cap, it's the euphoric early days, of course, and they haven't reported revenues, for multiple quarters. Their market cap is basically 10x of what Yelp is, 25.7 billion today, and Yelp is 2.7 and change, 2.76 billion. So, I mean, it's really striking. Yelp is now afflicted by the problems that the traditional directory publishers, the old Yellow Pages and old media companies had, which was the perception that their days were numbered, there was no growth there. And Yelp, by doing this kind of SaaS product, may start to change the discussion around their future. They'll have to sort of back it up. But I don't know where they would go next after this from a vertical perspective, but interesting.
I think home services would not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I
you're
think
right.
Moving more into the thumbtack sort of verticals with a business operations product for them, I think could be a natural next step. So,
well, they already do lead gen RFPs, and they do. I've used the messaging product with businesses, and it works pretty well. So they could build a couple more tools in there and have something that would be pretty interesting. Scheduling, invoicing, that kind of stuff.
Although, at GatherUp, we interacted with Toast. We had an early multi-location client that wanted to integrate with Toast, and Toast was totally open with their API, and they worked with us. So we could build the integration. Many of these companies now want to charge you for integrations, all this crazy stuff. I have a little trouble imagining a company like whoever, a SaaS product, wanting to interact with Yelp and accessing their APIs in a rational, reasonable, open way. It's like hard for me to even envision Yelp acting that way.
So they did release this guest management product with Olo and one other
Right.
Punch.
So
but is it an open API? Will they work with anybody, or is it just this is what we're
It's a biz dev thing, I suspect.
All valid questions, right? And those are fairly scaled startups in themselves. So whether the next GatherUp will want to integrate with a Yelp API, I think is a really good question.
So on that note, it's my turn to talk about
tough week for segues, man.
Yes,
really
well,
he's a little off his game.
Okay, so I'm not wearing it right now because it's on my bathroom sink. but I'm wearing the Halo band that Amazon put out, and I did it to use it as a sleep tracker, and it's been very interesting. But the last night it didn't even register. I had so little sleep, it just didn't even register. And it shames you if you don't have enough sleep. Ooh, poor. That last night was poor. but anyways,
is that effective? Is that going to help you sleep better the next night?
No, it is actually interesting to see. It's a pretty good product. And they're expanding it. Which brings me to what I'm going to start talking about. It is a pretty good product. They've got a sort of a 2.0 version with a Fitbit-like screen that they announced at their hardware event yesterday. And they see, that was a sort of stealth segue that I just did. So Amazon had this big hardware event where they announced a wide range of things. There's a couple of interesting services, kind of quasi services, but mostly it was hardware, Echo devices, new Halo thing, bigger many variations on existing devices. But what was striking to me was the Astro robot. Astro was, of course, the Jetsons' dog's name, for those that remember the Jetsons. And it's described as an Alexa on wheels, or it's like a Roomba with a screen or something. It's like a robot vacuum. It'll follow you around. You can interact with it. You can do video calls. I guess you can do anything you can sort of do on one of their screens with voice control. You can do on this. And they make it this very playful, cute thing in their promotional material. But immediately people started saying, no, this is some insidious, kind of surveillance device that's going to come into your house. And it costs $1,000 for the early adopters, and it's going to be $1,500 for those people who wait.
And apparently when it walks off a staircase and breaks, there's no way to ship it back to Amazon, from what I could read.
Is that a real thing?
I read that. I read that they tend to step off steps, and when they break, there's no repair mechanism at this moment.
All right. Well, that sounds like a great product.
but just a note on this. I was thinking a lot about why Apple Voice and voice interaction works for me. And it's because I have a phone with me all the time, but then when I get in my car, I have a button I can push. And when I'm not in my car, I'm walking down the street, I have my watch, or I'm on my bike, or I'm at home and I have a home pad. So that voice is ubiquitous for me, so that I can learn to interact with it and it can learn me. And the problem with having just an in-home product like Facebook wants to do or Amazon's trying to do is that it isn't ubiquitous, and you can't develop the necessary habits to use voice in a broad range of contexts.
But I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because if you've got Google products and you've got Amazon products and you've got Apple, which I do here,
they work
one of them will train you to they work more or less the same, right? You sort of get trained to use Siri or trained to use Alexa or the Google Assistant, and you could transfer that into these other devices. Now you're in a complete, like, hermetically sealed Apple world there.
That's right. All Apple all the time.
Well, and this is what Amazon was talking about yesterday, was sort of ambient computing, which is their way of trying to move beyond the smartphone. Facebook has got glasses that they're trying, the metaverse, whatever.
Right, they're trying to interact with car. They have car dashes they're working with. But.
Right. So if you've got a smartphone, then that's your sort of anchor asset. I mean, Google's in a little bit of a different position, but if you don't have a smartphone, then you're trying to circumvent or move beyond, transcend the smartphone and say, this is the future. But what was really striking to me about the Astro coverage was how kind of hostile it was right out of the gate. It wasn't like in the old days, as we were discussing before this call, in the old days, you would have got these people sort of saying, yeah, this is really cool, or this works, it doesn't work well, it costs this much, here's the market for it, here's the competition. But now you get these pieces that will talk about it being essentially an evil device, coming to do something really dangerous and damaging to you. And that is fundamentally different. And it's been sort of building for a long time. But the attitude now to these companies is one of suspicion and even hostility in many instances. And that's kind of across the board. I think Apple gets it.
I think Apple's an exception. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it gets it a little bit less. I mean,
Speaking of Apple devices listening in, Mike.
well, yeah, the App Store discussion. Apple has been charged with hypocrisy, both around privacy and the App Store, and is seen as a self-interested actor trying to protect its own monopolies or advance its own revenue goals by making it harder for other people to do app download ads in other places. Apple gets more revenue, that kind of thing, with iOS 14.5. But what's also striking to me beyond the hostility of the coverage is just the general mood now that we're all in, where we are surrounded by these devices. Everybody we know uses them, these websites. We feel compelled to use them. I mean, we work in this industry, but everybody feels compelled to participate, and there's more and more and more ambivalence or dissonance around it, but nobody feels like they can stop using these tools. I mean, Facebook is the perfect example. I've talked to 1 million people. Everybody's ambivalent about Facebook, but no one quits. And Facebook.
The question for Facebook, though, is how many are buying into their hardware world?
Not that many, right? That's where the distrust is showing up, because their portal device, as far as I can tell, is kind of a failure. I mean, they just released a new version of it, but it has really not sold relative to the others, their smart screen. And I think the glasses, it's interesting. The Facebook brand does not appear anywhere on the physical glasses. It's on the box, apparently.
Ray-Ban, right?
Right. And that's
brand.
that's very self-conscious, because I think if it was like Facebook on the side or something, it would be even more rejected than it may be. That's the first thing out of the reviewers' mouths. These glasses are really pretty cool. They're sort of normal, but I don't know how I feel about them being an extension of Facebook's apparatus. So we are trapped in a certain way in these ecosystems where we are feeling more and more ambivalent about using them, and like we have less and less power to do anything about it.
And people draw the line on the Astor, the glasses, and they say there is no way I'm going to give that. Whether the company is evil or not, the question becomes, do I really need to give up more data? And is there enough of a gain to do it? And I think a lot of people are making that assessment, even outside of the evil conspiracy model.
Well, I don't want to go that far and say it's an evil conspiracy. I think there's a logic operating.
It's easy to say that, though, and it gets said frequently.
Right.
I mean,
but I think that people would have been seduced by the devices. I mean, the parade of new hardware is always kind of, it's like, oh, I want the iPhone 13 and I want the Pixel 6 and I want this new, Surface computer or whatever. But
so speaking of fanboy, I did buy an iPhone 13 Pro, and I have to say the macro photography is incredible.
You didn't get the Pro Max?
Isn't
there a Pro Max?
There is a Pro Max. My hands are not big enough for the Pro Max.
So the difference between the Pro and the Pro Max is just the size? Is that right?
Yes, at this point.
We're digressing now into a hardware discussion.
Well,
but anyway,
we're trying to end on a happy note, Greg. So
I'm just fessing up that I'm fessing up to my.
Well, I'm contemplating the iPhone 13, but this is what I'm saying. It's like these devices that used to seduce and excite us now are seen as instruments of some surveillance apparatus that's ultimately coming for our data and will exclude us from health insurance, that kind of thing. Anyway, so next week Mike is going to be on speaking of health insurance, he's going to be on a bike trip, and so we will have a special guest, hopefully, who we will announce at the time. And Mike, I hope you have a great time on your trip. We'll see you back in 2 weeks.
For
All
sure.
right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Yep.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.